Shalom, everyone. Today is November 25th, 2024. We're discussing Parshat Toldot. Parshat Toldot. Sorry about last week. We missed Chaye Sarah. We had the funeral, and I hope you enjoyed whatever substitutes we had on the Parsha talk and the Parsha sheet. I was focused on the beautiful story, the pre-story, which is Abraham dispatching the servant, and what's really going on there, why he insists, etc. But we're going to move on to another story here, the story at the beginning of Parsha Toldot, not the birth of the twins, but the birthright story. The birthright story, which we're going to look at in a couple of ways. One, and this is kind of picking up on a motif that ran through last week, and I was quite taken by that motif and maybe wanted to pursue that, but also a different kind of analysis. So there may be two parts to this class, um, and they are but they're linked. Okay, so the story then is the story of Jacob and Esau and the sale of the birthright. And just I'm laughing here because I have a nice graphic here, and we'll put it up in a second. Here we go. Okay, this is the graphic of the. Let's see if it works. This as a focus. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So we have two babies here. One saying, "Haliteni na min ha'adoma adoma zeh." Give me some of this red stuff. And the other one says, "Takid ketchup." Just say ketchup, okay? That's a nice way of saying it. Uh, and it's a very cute little graphic. And then there's this one here. This is a mural painting, uh, and it gives a totally different meaning to the text. Haliteni namin ha'adom adom hazeh. Give me the red stuff. And they have a bottle of wine here and some red wine, and it's live for the moment. And that's how this artist is interpreting this. So we're into this now. I said uh the leitmotif, or the motif that connected the story of the servant to this story, is one word, which is shua, the an oath. And it strikes me, as I collected sources for this, that it's a much bigger topic that ties together many stories. Just before we get into the actual text of it, you recall that um, you know Jacob sits at home. He's a shepherd, but he's also a home dweller. Esav is a hunter. Esav comes in from his hunt. He is weary, famished. Jacob, having made a stew, a red stew, Esav wants some of this to eat. Esav says, "Give me some of this red stew." And Jacob says, "Sell me your birthright." And Asaph says, "What? I'm dying here. What do I care about my birthright?" And Jacob then says, "Swear to me, swear Ishavali, swear to me." And Asaph swears. So it's a sale that is made, that is bonded by an oath. And then, of course, the transaction takes place, and Asaph leaves. We'll look at it in depth in a second. But I just wanted to make the connection between the idea of oaths, and we have a number of oaths already in the book of Genesis prior to this moment. And it seems that they have something in common, and that's what I was going for. But then we're going to leave it and look at the story. So we have a story where Avimelech makes Avram swear an oath. If you recall, back in the Parsha, two Parshas ago, Vayera, there's this moment where Abraham goes to live in Gerar, in that area of the Western Negev, and Avimelech, who is the kind of, uh, fief chief of that area, he says to Abraham, "Swear to me by God, if you should ever deal falsely with me, with my progeny, my posterity, rather in loyalty, as I have dealt with you, deal with me and with the land in which you have sojourned." Abraham said, "So I do swear." Okay, so in Hebrew, it's Vayibayitahi was at that time Avimelech ufichol sar tzva'o el Avraham lemor. Elohim imcha b'chol asher atah. Say, God is with you with everything. V'atah hishava li b'Elohim. Swear to me by God. Hine im tishkor li ulinini ulenechdi kachesed asher asiti imcha tasei madi. Don't do falsely with me or to my grandchildren or great grandchildren. The As I have accorded kindness to you, so shall you accord kindness to me. And so Abraham and Avimelech swear, or Abraham swears, and that oath functions as a kind of bond between them. It's I'm trying to differentiate in some way between an oath and a covenant and a promise. All of these are somewhat related to each other. It seems to me that given that this is about a relationship and it's about their future relationship, it's bonded by an oath which would be something that transcends time. That's my initial hunch as to what an oath is. The oath is something that goes beyond a specific moment. Okay, and so here in chapter 22, which is the Akedah, God says at the end, when the hand is up and God says, "Stop, don't do it." Now I know, right? And then God says, "Bi nishbati num Adonai, by myself I swear," Yahweh's utterance. Ki yana asher asita et hadavar hazeh v'lo chasachta et bincha et yechidecha, because you have done this thing, you've not withheld your son, your only one. Ki varecha varecha v'arbe arbe et zarecha kechochvei hashamayim. I will bless you. I will make you increase like the stars of the heaven and the sand of the sea. And v'yirash zaracha et sharoivav. Your seed shall inherit the gates of your enemies, and throughout all of the nations of the earth shall enjoy blessing through your seed, in consequence of the fact that you have listened, hearkened to my voice. In other words, this is God's oath. Bi nishbati. That's the main, by my swell I swear. So at that moment, God is promising, making an oath to Abraham. And again, the theme seems to be that this moment of swearing transcends that actual moment. It's going to go beyond, and here in the sense of eternity. Give you a couple more examples. So we have the moment of last week's parsha, which is where Abraham wants to swear his servant, and I was trying to figure out, well, why are they using the language of oath there? Why is he saying to his servant, swear to me an oath? And let's see, based on what I've said already, maybe you can try and answer that question. Why would he be saying to his servant, swear an oath to me that you will not let my son marry a Canaanite? Anybody want to give that a shot?
Well, it was very important to him that.
Well, of course, it was very important to him. Yes, that's a good point, Marlene. Yeah.
But he also says, swear to me by God, so that it's an acknowledgement that Abraham has this imprimatur to say to him, go and do this.
So he is swearing by God. That's correct. That's a good observation. And that gives him the kind of, as you said, a royal stamp, a kind of.
But it also gives him a witness. Other oaths have been done in private, but here God is going to be the witness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that, and that becomes the theme that we see later on in even legislation in Deuteronomy, especially, you can't use that formula of oath, with any malice or any kind of, you can't misuse that formula. Okay. But, considering that I just, my train of thought here is that, well, you have Avimelech and Abraham making an oath, and you have God making an oath, and both of those are transcending time. Okay. So here you have a moment, and here's where I'm interpreting it, last week's scene very, very closely, which is here's an old man, he's 140 years old. And evidently there's an irony here. Evidently, he feels he's too old to travel. Okay. So he dispatches the servant. Um, and he doesn't dispatch Isaac because he doesn't want Isaac to leave the land. The irony is he may be too old to travel, but in the very next scene, he gets busy and he marries another woman and he, puts out another, six children. So I don't think it's the fact that he doesn't want to go there, it doesn't is too old to go there. He doesn't want to go there, and he doesn't want to have this interaction with his brother, and he doesn't want to be seen as being needy before his brother, who is already way advanced in profligation of children. Okay. That's it's not a cynical take, but it's a kind of starker take on the story, because Abraham was still had quite a lot of vigor. Okay, although the text does say Baba Yamim, he was advanced in age. That obviously lends us to believe that he was beginning to be frail. So let's just say there are things in the story that don't accord, that just are not reconcilable. One of which is, well, on the one hand, he's too frail to travel. On the other hand, he's not frail enough to, cease and desist from making children. Marlene, you had to kind of.
The two oaths here, though, are, although they both involve time, one is an eternal oath and one is a time-bound oath. If you find
Yeah.
this right person, then the oath is finished.
Right. But so here's I'll just jump to the punchline, which is he's afraid that he's going to die. And so he's got to find a way to hold his servant fast to a promise that will transcend his own death. And that's why he uses an oath there. He doesn't make him sign a contract. I mean, today we would make someone sign a contract, and you're bound by your word in a will or in a testament. These are legal instruments, right? In the absence of a legal instrument such as the contract, the will, etc., you have an oath, and the oath transcends time. And evidently, there may not even be a statute of limitations to it. Okay. So that means that the servant, in this case, is obligated for the rest of his life to do this. In the event, it's almost as if it's saying, in the event that I die, Abraham is saying, I want you to take this responsibility on for yourself, because it's so important to me, and I need that. Oh, I need that solemn bond by God as witness that you will take that on for as a responsibility. And I think that that's what's going on here in the language of the oath. Okay. Any other remarks or observation about that? Let me go on then. This would be over here. Here we go. So another example. When he says this, he when he says this to the servant, he says, God swore to me, God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and my kindred, who spoke to me, who swore to me, saying, give this land to your seed. He himself will send this messenger on before you, so that you will take a wife for me. God, it's never in the language of an oath, by the way. So there's something strange going on here. When Abraham says, Vash, the God who made an oath with me that he will give me the land, God never makes the statement to Abraham of the land in the form of an oath. It's Abraham that understands that the promise made to him is an oath, and everywhere else in the Torah, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, it's always understood to be an oath. Okay, but I'm going to go on with that. In our parsha, we have the following. So Yaakov said, "Sell me your firstborn right here and now." Esav said, "Here I am on my way to dying. So what good to me now is my firstborn right?" Yaakov said, "Swear to me here and now." He swore to him, and he sold his firstborn right to Yaakov. Okay, so we have this. This is a moment. He's saying he's putting it here. I put these sources in chronological order. Uh, but he's really saying it not only for this moment, he's saying it for all time. And I think that's the force of having an oath here. I'll just give you a couple more examples. This is God speaking to Isaac later in this parsha. Vakimoti atashvua, give all these lands, I will fulfill the sworn oath that I swore to Abraham your father. So here, God is making mention of the land as an oath, okay, whereas to Abraham was only a promise. And then another oath between Avimelech and Yitzchak. We'll skip that one. And then we have an oath between Jacob and Lavan. Okay. And then an oath that Jacob makes Joseph swear when he says, I don't want to be buried here in Canaan. Jacob makes Joseph swear an oath. Israel's days drew near to death. So he called the son Joseph and said to him, "Pray if I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh," similar to Abram and the servant. "Deal with me in loyalty and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt. Carry me out of Egypt. Bury me in the burial site. I will do according to his words." But he says, "Swear to me." So he swore to him. In other words, Jacob, we always interpret this as Jacob was not trusting of Joseph and made him swear an oath to bind his word to the idea that he would take the body out of Egypt and bury him in Canaan. And again, that idea is the oath is something that transcends a person's life. Lastly, Joseph does the same thing. Vayashba Yosef et bnei Israel. Joseph had the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will take account of you, bring my bones up from here." So Joseph, at the end of his life, also wants to have an oath done. And so I tried to follow the thread of oath taking in the book of Genesis, and show that oaths, it seems to me at first blush that oaths are about something beyond time, as opposed to covenants, which are similar, but covenants have a kind of reciprocity in them. And a lot, which is a different kind of promise, and a neder, something, it's a vow, which is something that we'll see next week if we look at that particular passage, where Jacob makes a vow saying, "Look, I have nothing now, but when I return from Canaan, I will give you a tithe of everything I have." Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, this question may be somewhat off topic, but how do you reconcile this notion of an oath being timeless with kol nidre and sort of the notions about time-limited types of oaths
Neder.
being forgiven?
Right,
It's
exactly.
neder.
And so it's so interesting. We have a number of words that indicate promises, and I think there are a lot of different nuances to each one of these words. So a neder and kol nidre is a vow. A vow, we would say it's something I have vowed to complete. I have vowed to do that I didn't do, so I'm nullifying the vow. I find this, it's such a complicated topic. There is a point that when we get to the laws of vows that are in Numbers, the book of Numbers, I tend to kind of focus on other parts of that parsha because it's so difficult. What's a promise? These are the terms themselves um, are terms that have very specific legal and halachic implications. Um, and in the Bible they also have certain categories. So I'm trying to identify here what is the nature of these vows. You have vows between God and Abraham, God and Isaac. God and Jacob, and you have vows between individuals, Abram and Avimelech, Isaac and Avimelech. You have a vow between Jacob and Esav, which is this week's Parsha. You have a vow between Jacob and Joseph, and you have a vow between Joseph and his brothers. So they're different. How would they be different from a neder? I think I'm almost, I almost want to say that a neder has the connotation of it's a promissory note, right? I vow that when I have the money, I'll pay you back, that kind of thing. Uh,
Uh,
yes, go ahead.
isn't also a neder of lots of times is time bound? You know,
Neder
like
would
you.
be time. Okay, so that would make it, clear difference between a neder and a shvuah. Okay, as opposed to so that's I'm only putting that out because it's a motif in this story. It's a motif that has recurred. It's going to recur again, and it's something that was worth looking at. Let's look now at the story itself, and I want to show how um, a certain technique of reading stories can actually help us understand them. And I start out by saying this, people, let me just stop sharing for a second. People think the Bible is like naive and the Bible is, the Bible is so irrelevant. And, aside from that being an offensive statement, it's just not true. Um, the Bible is a very sophisticated book, and demands of us a certain kind of attention that, of course, we can use with other pieces of literature, but itself, is there is a certain artistry in the architecture of stories, and it's deliberate. And you could see by looking at these stories under a microscope as we do that they have been layered and layered in their development, not only through the artistic way that the narrator is presenting them, but I'm guessing that as the stories themselves evolved from oral tales to written tales, they were put down in such a way that their form assists us in understanding their content. This theme of content and form is a good theme. We've returned to it, from time to time, but it's something that is such a very powerful feature of the Bible and also of the Mishnah and the Talmud. And so here we're going to show some examples here of how the form assists us in understanding the content. So at the outset of this, I would say the content of the story, we call this story the sale of the birthright. But by the end of this little analysis, we may want to revise the title of the story. Okay, so here's the story. I'm going to read it quickly in Hebrew and English, and then we're going to look at it carefully in terms of its structure. And you'll see some elegant architecture in the structure. So the story goes as follows, and you're familiar with it. Vayazid Yaakov Nazid. Once Yaakov was boiling a boiled stew. Okay. And Vayavo Esav min hasadeh. Esav came in from the field. V'hu ayef, and he was weary. Vayomer Esav el Yaakov. Esav said to Yaakov, How eternally na min ha'adom hazeh. Pray, give me a gulp of this red stuff. Ki ayef anochi. I am so weary. Okay, kara shemo Edom. They called him the red one. Vayomer Yaakov, Jacob said, Michrach hayom et bichoratcha li. Sell me your firstborn right here and now. Vayomer Esav, Hine anochi olech lamut v'alama zeh li bichora. I'm going to die. What good is my firstborn right? Yaakov said, Yishava li chayom. Swear to me here and now. Vayishava lo, vayimkor et bichorato liYaakov. He swore to him and sold his firstborn right to Yaakov. V'Yaakov natan le'Esav lechem u'nezid adashim. Yaakov gave Esav bread and boiled lentils, Vayochal, Vayesht, Vayakom, Vayelech, Vayizev, Esav et HaBechorah. He ate and he drank and he arose and went off. Thus did Esav despise the firstborn right. Okay, so in the space of what, 4 verses, 5, 6 verses, we have compressed in here a whole story that tells us about two characters, two brothers and their relationship, and that one brother is a hunter. We know he's a hunter, but he's coming in from the field, he's weary, and the other brother is at home, he's been making stew. So we have a sense of where this is taking place. We have some interior, landscape here. We have to figure out motivations. We have to think about their characters, and there are lots and lots of things that we can think about. The low-hanging fruit here, I would just point to the last verse, okay? Here's your low-hanging fruit. Just interpret for me, Vayocha, Vayesh, Vayakam, Vayelech, Vayivez, Esav et Bechorah, right? Give me your best interpretation of this string of verbs: Vayochal, Vayesh, Vayakom, Vayelech, Vayivez. 5 verbs. What does it tell you? Just off the top of your heads. Just that's nice interpretive question. When it gives you a string of those verbs, what does it say? What does it suggest to you? Impulsivity, right? Da, ba,
Yeah.
ba, 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 right? And that's the way the Bible doesn't have to say it, and he was very impulsive in the way, no, it just says, Vayocha, Vayesh, Vayacham, blah, 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 blah. He goes and goes and goes, and we have the string of verbs that tell us that. That's a nice interpretive question. There are other things that we can interpret from this, okay? But here's what I want to show you, okay? And I want to show you that the text itself is built in this way. I tried to make it as visual as possible with color coding and through this kind of elaborate program here. I'm putting it in Hebrew. I have the translation coming up in a second. The Hebrew, because Hebrew is just a little more compact language, it just fits better on a screen than the English. The English will be a little smaller print. But you see, and this I'm borrowing this approach from one of my favorite authors, Yonatan Grossman. We talked about him a lot, and I saw this in his book, and I thought, this is interesting. Okay, so there's symmetry in the story. There's symmetry in the story. There's a structure to the story, and there's a center to the story. So this is the Hebrew, and I'm going to switch to the English text in a second, okay? But for those of you who are more familiar or comfortable in Hebrew, you can see that there's the beginning is symmetrical with the end. The second part is symmetrical with the second last. The third part is symmetrical with the third, the fourth, and there's the center. The center is Esav said, I am going to die. Why do I need this birthright? That's the center of the story. Now, Grossman is not the only one to point out that the center of the story is always where the heart is. I've been, it's a favorite theme of mine in the study of biblical texts, which is count the words and figure out where the center word is, and that will usually give you the heart of the story, okay? And so I like to point out to, my favorite examples are Psalm 23 and Psalm 121. If you look at Psalm 23 and you count the words and you find the center of the psalm, it's Ata imadi, you are with me, okay? And I've said this sermonically, which is that's religion altogether. Religion is relationship, or Judaism. Judaism at its core is you are with me. It's a relationship. Everything else is poetry and ritual and art form and creativity, etc. But at the core, the nuclear core of Judaism is the sense of relationship. Okay, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay, same with Psalm 121. Adonai Shomrech, God is your guardian. That's it. That's the feeling of connectedness, being watched over by God. And so you can point to a number of texts like that, where the center of the text, the core of a certain text, will tell you everything that it's about. We're going to leave this question for a second. I'm going to dangle it in front of you, but the core of this text is, I'm going to die. What do I need the birthright for? Now I'm going to have it in English, okay? So you see how this text is situated here, and I hope you all have it on one full screen, right? Everybody give me a thumbs up. Good. Okay. So look at this, and we're going to start analyzing this in terms of its symmetry. Okay. So again, once Yaakov was boiling boiled stew, okay, and then in the scheme of the story, that is symmetrical to Esav despising the firstborn. That is not evident to us yet, but I will try to answer how A and A1 are actually, similar to each other. Okay, boiling the boiled stew, Esav despised the firstborn. Now, one flaw here, or one disadvantage, is that we're doing this in English. We're not picking up the playfulness of the Hebrew language, but we'll get there. Okay. But here, B, Esav came in from the field and he was weary. He ate and drank, arose and went off. Okay. I'm going to give you a second to think about how these are connected. We'll go to C. Esav said to Yaakov, give me a gulp of the red stuff, for I'm weary. C, gave the bread and boiled lentils. D, Yaakov said, sell me your firstborn right here and now. Yaakov said, swear to me here and now. You swore to him. So you can see that the story is built in this way, that it's what would be the image is like, it's almost not an accordion, but it's like the beginning and the end are symmetrical. The second steps are symmetrical. The third steps are symmetrical. The fourth steps are symmetrical. And the fifth step is right in the center of all of them. They don't necessarily all add up in terms of the number of words, but there are four stages that start the story and four stages that end the story. And the center is the pivotal moment, the core of the story. Let me go this. We'll do this now a little more in granular detail. The B line is, Esav came in from the field and he was weary. I'm going back to the Hebrew, is Vayavo Esav min hasadeh v'hu ayef. Vayavo Esav min hasadeh v'hu ayef. He comes in from the field. Okay, so what do you expect? What do you expect that the symmetry of coming in from the field to be? He leaves. So you have coming and going. Okay, nice. That's beautiful storytelling. I see him now. This is the way the narrator is conveying this so artfully. I'm listening to the Torah reader read. I'm listening to the narrator here, and I hear Vayavo Esav min hasadeh. And I know that he's coming in from a field into an interior space. I know he's leaving. Okay. So B is coming from the field. We are tired and weary when he comes in, but we are satisfied when he leaves. Okay. So the leaving that matches. That's simple. Now there's a whole exercise we could do with the word ayef. What does ayef mean in modern Hebrew and much of biblical Hebrew? Ayef is tired, weary, but ayef is also hungry. Okay, so the narrator is choosing the word ayef for hunger, but it's ayef to indicate also a kind of physical exhaustion that is coupled with this extraordinary hunger. Now, it takes us into another piece of insight, which is, why would he be hungry? Why would he be hungry? Okay, I'll stop here and just ask the very basic interpretive question. He's hungry.
He went hunting and he didn't get anything.
That's right. Okay. So you know, I walk a lot on the canal, okay? It's hysterical to watch people on the canal. People, I see people fishing on the canal. And my reaction is, oh my God, you're gonna take a fish out of the canal, the Raritan Canal. I mean, come on. I mean, it's not that it's polluted, but all right. And no, but the second thing I think about is like I never ever see anybody catch anything. Okay. I never see, and I'm always tempted to ask the people, it's embarrassing to say, have you caught anything? Have you found anything today? You know, and so evidently, I'm not much of a fisher person, okay, but here's what I know about fishing, which is part of the joy of fishing is sitting there and throwing it in and reeling it in. You get nothing. You do it again. You sit, and if you smoke, you smoke. You're this, you're that. You read, you're this. And people love this. Okay. Now, of course, there are good fishermen who are very skilled at and they know their lures and they know all the things and they know exactly where to do this and all of that. Okay. But part of fishing and hunting is knowing what you're doing. Okay. We've talked about this before, and just in terms of the skills that are necessary for hunting. To know hunting means you have to know a little bit about animal life. You have to learn this. You have to apprentice this. You have to learn this from elders. You have to be, there's a certain wisdom in indigenous societies. And I'm thinking about, the north of Canada. Of course, we have, in America also, hunting and now it's not only indigenous, but hunting is tradition. There are certain things that are learned that are passed on from father to son. I don't know, Skip, you want to comment on this or what?
Well, being a fisherman,
Okay, go ahead.
okay? When I go fishing, my number one objective is I don't want to catch anything.
Uh-huh.
I just want to be myself
There you go. Okay.
by my own
Yeah.
with nobody, no distractions, no radios, no telephones, no TVs, no distractions around me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and for me, Rabbi,
Yeah.
when that happens, that is the greatest fishing day I ever had.
Of course. So what I'm saying is that there's part of that is, I know, for lack of a better word, it's a spiritual experience in the sense of, just being able to be alone and be in nature. What I want to say though is with regard to hunting is, along the lines of there's incredible amounts of knowledge and information that needs to be conveyed to a hunter. Okay. When I've done research on the story in the past, I've looked at different videos and it's astounding to see, how much a part of the culture it is. And it's also astounding to see that it's actually with it's a very gendered world, hunting, um, in the sense that it's a very father to son world, especially in cultures where that male role of being the hunter gatherer is still quite pronounced. Um, and I'm thinking, in Inuit society, in Native American society, in Canada, this is part of, the lore of the. I remember listening to stories on the radio of going out to the goose hunt, and that adults, adult Inuits, that they're called, otherwise called Eskimo, but that's not used anymore. That they recall learning the first time of holding a rifle, holding a hunting rifle, and shooting geese. And one story that sticks out in particular is this kid, and it was it's a kind of a festival outing, which is everybody's going out because the geese are flying back and they're fat and they're rich with all of their, having eaten, and they're and so this man is recounting the story of his childhood, how he took the rifle for the first time and he shot the geese, and two birds fell out of the sky and not one. And his mother was so happy. They took the birds home and they cut them up and they boiled them up and they cooked them up, and the goose fat and all that. And the delight and the joy and the seriousness with which which is done, and the sense of reverence for also these are important things, because there's tremendous information that happens from father to son. My punchline here is Esav has no father who does this. And Esav is essentially alone. Esav would have had to learn either by himself through trial and error or through apprenticing with other people who he doesn't have. And so my conjecture here in terms of why he comes home hungry is because he has nobody to guide him. And he was not successful that day. And that in the past he may have been successful, but his lack of success is due to his lack of information and knowledge, and a sense of weariness and a sense of just distraught at I don't know how to do this and I want to do this. And I've been successful a little bit, but I'm not successful all the time. Go ahead, Susie.
So I just wanted to comment, it's the same in the animal world, except there it's egalitarian. Female animals also hunt. And if you've read or seen the movie, it's a true story. Born Free, it's a series of books, Born Free, Living Free, and Forever Free. Two rangers out in the Serengeti, whose job it was to protect the lions, rescued a lion cub. She was part of a pride of 3, but the other 2 cubs got away. Their mother was killed by a poacher. They took her home and raised her, decided that they didn't want her to be in a zoo. And they taught her how to hunt. They wanted to return her to the wild. People told them that they're nuts. She's not gonna survive there because she doesn't know how to be in the wild. And they had to. I mean, lions have certain instinctual behaviors like dragging and stuff like that. But they actually taught her how to hunt. She went out into and then she had her own family and brought them back in to meet grandma and grandpa. and she taught her little pride there. She taught her children how to be around people and to keep their claws retracted. They were a little more
Okay,
wild
so you can see.
than Elsa was, but
Rabbi,
story.
Yes. Go ahead, Tova. Yes.
I don't understand. He was very hungry. I get that. Why did he say, I'll be dying anyhow? So why do I need to be firstborn? Where does death come in as a thought process?
That would be the central question. You recall, and I'll just put this up again, that's at the center of the story, right? This is the center verse of the story, which is, here I'm on my way to dying. So what good is from now firstborn right? So I mean, I'm just going to highlight that. And why is he saying that? And that's a very good question. And I mean, this takes us into the character. The character of Esav is someone who really can't see the future. Okay, he can't perceive of any kind of, I guess, Tova, in the therapy world you would call it delayed gratification, right? There's no, to be a mature person, let's say, okay, speaking for mature people, is to understand that you can't get things immediately, that there's certain things you have to wait for. And in your field, right? And Stanley, corroborate, that's delayed gratification. Stanley, just, chime in anytime.
Yes. Although I'd like to comment on this
Yeah.
when you're finished.
I see that. Okay. So what he, we use these expressions, oh, I could die, like that, without any kind of meaning, and that may be, one way to understand this, but another way to understand this is, he doesn't put any value in things that are abstract. And that's another that ties us back, by the way, to oaths. Oaths are made on things that are not concrete. John, you had a question, and then Stanley, and then Bob. Go ahead.
Well, I know the purpose of this is to paint a negative portrait of Esau, to make him out to be kind of like a fool, and yet, and also an inarticulate person, and yet later, when he talks to his father and he finds out he's lost the birthright, he speaks with poignancy and eloquence.
Yes.
So,
And so I'm not sure. I mean, I know what you mean there in sense of, I'm not making him out to be stupid or or naive. I am, though, thinking of him as impulsive and giving that kind of, and that would be a more or less, conventional interpretation here. However, I agree with you, and I've been trying over the years to collect different examples from literature, or movies of ogres who speak in kind of rhymes and in very sophisticated, even Jack and the Giant Beanstalk, there's a motif in that story which is fee fi fo fum I, he speaks in a certain kind of rhythmic way. And if you recall Shrek, he also has a certain cleverness. Or the Princess Bride, the giant in the Princess Bride. One of the things that the giant does, that's such a magnificent movie, is he's constantly playing with words. And and I keep wondering, and I should, call up a folklorist at some point to say, can you identify for me, a motif running through folklore of the giant savant, basically, the guy who, is such an ogre, yet has, compensates for the big clumsiness with, the attempt to be funny or clever or witty with words. Now, Stanley, go ahead.
Well, this is along the same lines as what John said. I really feel that Aesop gets a bad rap,
He
and
does.
there's not enough to hang our hat on his being this impulsive character who can't, see the abstract. I mean, or is not interested in that. I mean, it's a question of a basic human need. If you are, as he said, if we take him at his word, and I guess you don't have to, you can interpret it otherwise, that he is weary and he's hungry and he's starving and he's dying. What is this business with a birthright? I want to eat, I want to stay alive. So
Yeah.
how can we blame the
It's
man
like
wanting
the
to do that? I don't know, frankly, what the circumstances are. Maybe there's a refrigerator in each tent and he could walk a few steps and get something else. I don't know that, but on the face of it, he is really like almost finished. So that he would want to eat something there and leave the abstract, namely the birthright, to an unknown future, I can empathize with that.
it's like with Mars bars or whatever. It's you're not you when you're hungry. You're not you when you're hungry.
That's right.
And he's not himself, and he can't think beyond it. And of course, any of us, I mean, at the end of the day of a fast, you might be, a little bit impulsive. But I wouldn't talk for anyone who has obviously experienced severe hunger. Bob, go ahead.
I have to say, I also have a rather different take on some of this, and it's informed from some Hasidic talks I've recently heard, that this section is really also perhaps a meditation on the Esau and Yaakov and Rivka that exists within each of us. And that in fact, there's an oscillation taking place between the material world or the animal world and the spiritual world that is going on in this dialogue. And in fact, when you talk about a hunger, I'm not sure if it's just a physical hunger or if it's a spiritual hunger as well that's taking place. And so it's just a very curious, different take on what this interaction
Sure,
is.
sure.
The other comment I would just make is that although the birthright was sold, they mentioned that it's only in Shemot that it's actually acquired by the people. And so it's all about a developmental journey within ourselves about how we wrestle between these different material worlds and
Sure.
spiritual worlds. So that's 2 cents
Yeah,
on that.
and as always, the layers of allegorical and mystical interpretation, they hover for us. These all of these represent, and can be fit into that kind of narrative for sure. When you mentioned, the deeper hunger, I was just recalling that famous Saturday Night Live skit with the cowbell, what's his name? I have a hunger for more cowbell, That's it. Anyway, okay. Skip, you have a comment.
Uh, yes, we've been dwelling on Joseph
Yaakov,
or
Esav,
Yaakov. No, wait a minute. The
Esav,
brother,
Esav, yes.
Esau. I'm sorry, but we have not dwelt on Yaakov.
Right.
The way I look at this, he took advantage of the situation his brother was in.
Yes.
Okay. In today's vernacular, it's
Yeah.
called blackmail.
Well, yeah.
I mean, this is not you can't celebrate this
Not
oath.
at all. No. And in fact, hold that thought because we might get to that as a kind of punchline, which I'm going to now try and get to because I just looked at the clock. Okay. So here we go. We got we saw the parallel between he came in and he left. We're seeing the parallel between give me a gulp and he gave him the bread and boiled lentils. You notice that between C and C1, right here, oops, a daisy. That did it do that? Um, he, he Yaakov gives him bread and boiled lentils, uh, which is the bread is extra. It's extra on the menu. Okay. Uh, and then you have the D versus D1, which is, sell me and swear. He swore and he took it. Okay.
But he said, please.
Back to this and let's just look at that. You're looking at Pasuk seven Dalet Vayomer Micha Chayom et Bechorat Chali, that you sell me your Bechora.
Haliteni.
Haliteni. Right, good. So he is being gracious in using this. This would be um an oxymoron, okay? Because haliteni, this is a word that only occurs here, but gets evolves through rabbinic literature as the word that is a gross gulping in a singular motion. Stuff me with food,
Rabbi,
please.
another teacher pointed out that this verb refers to how one force feeds camels.
Yes, okay. So that's all in Mishnaic and Talmudic literature. But what he's saying here is just put it down my throat, okay? So Marlene, you point out nah, and I would say that's true. There's a certain kind of grace with that, but it's also gross with that. Okay. Now let's go to the punchline, which is okay. So he comes, there is coming and going, hunger and satisfied. Back we have Cain and Abel hovering in the back of our minds because Cain and Abel is the archetype of brotherly stories, and you can see that there that story happens out in the field, and this story happens indoors, and I think that can yield some interesting insights in terms of how the setting shapes the way we understand this. This is a very internal story. Okay, Asa's request for the stew. So what's the meaning of E, the center of the story? I'm gonna just take a second and translate. So, and here just the point. The essence of the story is not the transfer of the birthright from Esav to Yaakov, but look at the center of it. here I am on the way to dying. What good is me my firstborn right? Vayomer hine anochi olech lamut v'lama li zeh li bechora. Why do I need the bechora? And look how the story ends. Vayivez Esav et ha-bechora. He despises the bechora. So we have a movement here. The movement is that he goes and into the movement is he doesn't care about the bechora and he despises the bechora. How does this match up with Vayazed Yaakov Nazid? The word Vayazed also occurs only here. And here the sensitivity in the language is what we are trying to reflect on, which is that Vayazed is related to the word Zadon. Zadon. And Zadon, as Skip kind of intimated without really realizing it, there's malice here. Zadon is malice. So the story has framed a frame of both. It's darker as usual. There's the malice of forethought that Jacob has in purloining a birthright that he senses already that Esav has no relationship to. The reason why Esav has no relationship to the birthright is because it's an abstraction. It's a concept. It's an idea. It means that you have to think ahead of time. You have to think for the future. You have to think of, when do you think of a birthright? You think of a birthright only upon the death of your father, right? You think of a birthright only when you inherit something in the biblical, in antiquity. When does birthright really matter? Now, the rabbis, I love the way it kind of, makes all sorts of, efflorescence here of these ideas, because the rabbis connect the birthright, the privilege of serving in the temple. Originally, it was for the firstborn. If you transfer me your firstborn right, I'll get to serve. Oh, that's all nonsense. Okay, what is it? What's the real stuff? The real stuff is I want the covenant. Jacob knows about his grandfather. He knows about his father, and he knows that this is going to go to his brother because his brother is the firstborn. And he says, "Ah, I can't handle that. I just can't handle that. It just doesn't make sense to me. He's just not worth it." It's almost like saying, we'll get into a whole sidetrack here, which is, in dynastic situations, the firstborn is not necessarily the one that should inherit the crown. The firstborn is often the last one that should inherit. And it takes an awful lot of kind of training and preparation and kind of shaping, but there also has to be the raw material for the firstborn to be worthy of it. And what happens if the firstborn is not? Okay. And that's where the strife really happens. I can't find examples off the top of my head, although Jordan, the kingdom of Jordan would be a good example because, the dynasty was supposed to go to after King Hussein died, it was supposed to go to his brother, but at the very, very, very last minute, if you recall, he skipped over his brother and went to his son. Right? It happens to be that Abdallah is his, I think is his firstborn, or it may be a firstborn of one of his, whatever. I mean, he saw in Abdallah obviously something that was more capable than his own than what should have been the succession here. Do those examples happen in the British royal family? I'm sure we could dig up.
You mean like Harry and Charles?
Yeah, well, Harry has kind of, been groomed and comported himself now. He looks kind of regal now. I mean, Charles, may he live to be 120, but I doubt he will live as long as his mother. You know, Charles was always, groomed to be the heir. And and I think worthy of it, in sense that he's now it. There's certain character flaws, of course, but it stands to reason that you're going to have. I mean, I know families where if you were just to apply this paradigm to these families, it would be laughable because the firstborn a child in some of these families is not, it just doesn't have the wherewithal, capability, intellectual, whatever, to be the representative of the family. And so it tends to go to that which is more capable. So Jacob, my point is Jacob senses this. He senses hostility and impulsiveness, and he takes advantage of it. And that's Vayazed. He acts, and that the biblical author, through the story and the way that the story's architecture shows this, by putting Vayazed opposite to Vayivez, is saying to us, hey, listener, hey, reader, understand that these two are just opposite sides of the coin. Yes, Esav has malice. Sorry. Yes, Esav despises the birthright, but yes, Jacob also is malicious and also conniving. And we'll learn more of that from him in the future. We have a couple of comments. Bob, go ahead.
How much do you think that, or do the Midrashim comment on whether Yaakov knew the story of what happened to Ishmael, another firstborn that got sent away, and the role of the mothers in all of this?
Sure. And the very fact that you're able to summon that means that we don't need to necessarily look at the midrash, although I'm sure that there were. I just don't have them on the top of my head here, which would be, yeah, the Bible is, at least the stories of Genesis are always about the younger usurping the older, and the older, not giving the primogeniture and the pride of place in the birth story that privilege. I think there's a sustained polemic that the Bible has basically against nature, which is to say, nature doesn't govern things, God governs things. And if you're looking to nature, I mean, they're two things that are really in collision because, after all, religion is built on the firstborn, you give the firstborn, the first fruits, the first everything, so that's nature determining it. But equally, there's a sense that, well, God really determines this, and that human beings also determine. So you're quite right to find that this pattern really is consistent throughout, at least Bereshit and throughout the Tanakh. Go ahead, Marlene. Marlene.
Esav was not groomed. Yaakov was groomed at home. He was being trained to do this, where his brother was out in the field and the father was relying on the son to bring the food in. We know that because we've read the story. Bring me some stew. But when they say he was an Ish Tam and he stayed around the house, he was being groomed.
By his mother, by the way, because his mother loved him. He was a mommy's boy, we like to say, and yeah, Isaac loved his son, but you're quite correct to point out that you know, I mean, as much as Rivka loves Jacob and may in fact be grooming him to be, the heir, um, Isaac, is, we learn from the later story, is really not capable of being the outdoors person. And we have no indication from him either before or after that he's the only thing that we know of him in that enigmatic comment is that why does Isaac love Esav? Ki tzayid befiv. He loves the taste of game. And that little phrase, can open us to many, many different areas of why does he love that? What is it that he loves? He loves, like, fishing. He loves the idea, I mean, the romance of it, or he loves the taste of it, and that has led commentaries to many, many different kinds of speculations as to what that was about. Okay, Skip, you had your hand up there, or
Uh, yes, in response to Marlene, who brought the meat to the pot.
Yeah, so
It wasn't Yaakov.
no,
He was cooking beans.
he was
He was
cooking
cooking beans.
He
lentils.
was the rabbi's vegetarian guy.
Well,
Only he brought
so
the meat.
so interesting. So part of what some commentators point to is that the ruse here is that it's red, a red stew, and so some would say that
Blood.
what is blood, or is that it's a meat that Esav, comes in from the field smelling a meat dish or smelling something that he thinks is a meat dish. I was looking for this online.
Beyond beef.
Yeah, no. So he takes a bite out of it, and it goes like, "What is this? Oh my God!" And so he said, like the conversation, it's vegetarian. He goes, "Blech," I didn't come in to eat vegetarian. I want real meat. I don't want to eat. So there are a number of scenes, in movies, and I was trying to find a scene from Naked Gun 2.5 where, he's eating a tofu steak instead of a real steak, and he says, and that kind of revulsion at it. But the point is that this is the extent to which he manipulated him. He tried to manipulate him, and he undermined him. As I said, there's debate on this in terms of commentaries and interpretations. Is it deliberate? Is it not? Whatever. Point is that he is acting not. He's acting connivingly. He's acting, with a lot of malice, Jacob, and he succeeds. And yes, we can take it all to the different levels, of all the different kinds of internal spiritual conflict. But in the story, what makes the story work as a story, first is its architecture and how there's a lot of symmetry, and at the core, there fundamental unease that Esav has with his position in life, and Jacob with his own position, and that is what he's trying to rectify here, and that I think is what's pointed out by the structure of the story. Anyway, we've come to the end. I wish everyone a lovely Thanksgiving. Enjoy, the days ahead. You may get good weather, you may not. Who knows? uh, and I have my birthday on Wednesday, and
Oh,
it's
Mazel
turning
tov.
63.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And I my parsha is Parshat Vayeshev, so I'm going to make a kiddush for the 50th anniversary of my bar mitzvah in a few weeks. So we're all invited. Okay. All right.